Yes, yes. Jongintaba Ecovillage, Yahya Jongintaba, discussing how to journey to Africa, holiness. If you don't want to try this out before you leave there, it's something that you may want to come here for. To come here for. A life of holiness. This is how we're trying to live at Jongintaba Ecovillage. We're trying to live a holy life. I myself, I'm tired of that unholy place. There's too much wild stuff going on. And so I presented to you, I've shared with you really, what I've been working on for myself. And I want to remind you that I did not come public with this for 30 years. But now that things are going on, now that questions are asked, now that interest is expressed in terms of coming here, especially to Jongintaba Ecovillage, I said, okay, then let me go ahead and share what we're about and how we're trying to live, how we are living. And we're living a life of holiness, a kind of off-the-grid monasticism, if you will. And if you can deal with that, you're welcome. You're welcome. We'd love to have folk who can understand this and work with us to make it real for the rest of the world that seems to be searching for a new kind of holiness and spirituality, at least something to add to what they already have. All right, I've discussed the 5 virtues: freedom, creativity, integrity, discipline, and love. Freedom, creativity, integrity, discipline, and love. I've discussed the 5 stations of the mountain: forest, hills, slope, the summit peak, and descent. And I've discussed the 5 steps of organic learning: listening, questioning, note-taking, studying, and speaking. Now I want to show you that as a moral system, all of this is interrelated. And I would say really quickly, if you remember the affirmation I shared with you, how am I this day? I am good and I am great and I have faith. And for this great day I am grateful and I give thanks. Prayerfully with prayer expanding inwardly, and praisefully with inward praise expanding beyond me. There are 5 lines. And they also coordinate with this. Each line with the 5 virtues in sequence. Each line with the 5 stations of the mountain. Each line with organic learning's 5 steps. And so, what we see, let's start with organic learning and point back or look back to the virtues in the 5 stations of the mountain. When you think of listening as a moral element of us, think of prayer as a listening, an inhale and a listening. Not so much talking, that comes later at the end, but listening. What is being said to me by that which has created me? Not what do I have to talk? I don't know what I'm talking. I'm not out there in the greater expanse than what I am. I need to listen. And so my listening is that which affords me the greatest freedom. No one can stop me from listening. No one can even stop my listening. Even if I plug my ears, I hear. And so my hearing cannot be cut off unless I'm deaf. And perhaps we could even say that there's a kind of listening that occurs even then. And so my listening as a moral element affords me the greatest freedom. And my listening, in a sense, occurs in the forest. You might think of a baby in the womb who's already listening. Is in the forest of its mother's womb. All right. There's other ways to make these connections, and you should be creative with it yourself. If you really consider this, you write it down and really think about it, you'll see all kinds of connections if you study this just a little bit. Questioning is, at least in the organic learning paradigm, a type of creativity. I'm not creative in my listening. I hear what I hear. I'm not creative with it, lest I deceive myself. But my questioning is an opportunity to begin to be creative. That's my first step in creativity, to be able to ask a question. And just imagine the primordial human beings, those who are just beginning to communicate. All right? They listen like every other mammal. And they begin to formulate questions, first in their mind, and then be able to articulate them and be creative in the kinds of questions that I can. And so that's kind of equivalent to the up and down of the hills. And we'll leave the more of that connecting to you. The note-taking is the point of integration. I've done my listening and my questioning, and now I'm integrating that in my note-taking, whether it's on paper, in a notebook, or whether it's in my memory bank. I begin to integrate that which I listened to and that which I questioned. And it becomes integrated in the center location of my notebook or my memory bank. And that, the note-taking, is the beginning of the slope. This is the beginning of work. It's not difficult to listen. It's not difficult to question. It's a creative thing. It's a fun and enjoyable activity. But when I begin to take note, that requires a little work. And I would say also that note-taking, if you think back to the original human experience, must be the beginning of writing. That I took note of something, especially at the point that I was writing it down in the sand or on a stone or on a slate wall or whatever. That's the beginning of writing, because I took note as a means of surviving. And that's what all this is about. I listen, I question, primarily to survive. And survival is underneath all of those. And so my taking note was first, my first element of integrating, and it was my first ascent of a steep slope in my life as a primordial human being. Studying. Studying is what takes the greatest discipline, the greatest attentiveness, because I'm bringing all of this together now. The listening, the questioning, and the note-taking. That's work. That's work. I'm at the discipline of studying. Now, you could say that sounds like that's the slope to me. Okay. But it can also be that which occurs at the summit peak. I've climbed and I've climbed with my listening, my questioning, and my note-taking, and now I'm steady at the summit peak. And I'm studying. I'm at discipline at the summit peak. And once I've done my studying, it is best there, because the next step is to descend. That's where I do my speaking. And so the studying must occur at the summit peak, so that upon my descent, I'm ready to speak. After I've been there, after I've made this achievement of climbing the mountain that I am, the mountain of my relationships, the mountain of my studies, my education, the mountain of life itself again. Once I've achieved that and reached the summit peak, I'm ready to speak. I'm ready to descend to the people, to my family, to my friends, and speak what it is that I now understand about myself, about my world, about the ascent that I made. And that's where the act of love occurs. When I speak, I've gone through all of this. I brought underneath all of it the virtues of freedom, creativity, integrity, discipline, and love. And when I've done my listening, questioning, note-taking, and studying, when I've passed through the forest, the hills, the slope, and the summit peak, and I've done my studying there, I've been at discipline, I'm ready to descend. And when I descend, as I go down the mountain, I'm already talking. I'm already talking. You see, I'm sharing what it is that I know with you. And that's my act of love. That I have gone through all of this, the 5 stations of the mountain. I've developed my virtue along the way. And I've gone through the steps of organic learning. I'm ready to speak wisely, with understanding, from experience. I'm ready to speak. And isn't that an act of love, to be able to share all that I am? All that I've become is a consequence of this mountain of life that I've made my effort to pass through. Now, I told you when I first climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, I said I'll never climb this mountain again. It was difficult, but as soon as 6 months passed, I said I want to do this again, and I wanted to take my daughter to experience that with me, and I did. And so this is a challenge. It's a spiritual challenge. It is a moral paradigm. These together, 5 virtues, 5 stations of the mountain, the 5 steps of organic learning. There's one other thing I forgot to tell you, and I'm not going to try to fit it into a little space right now, so I'm going to have to come back one more time and do that. Just a few minutes.